welcome to the X22 Report. This is a special edition of the X22 Report. We are going to interview Gregory Mannarino today, and we'd like to welcome Gregory to the X22 Report. And we are going to start off here with the first question for Gregory.
So basically what I wanted to ask you, and I don't know how you think the financial collapse is going to come about, but where do you think it's going to happen first, and how do you think it's going to, lay out in terms of are there any signs? Is there anything that we should be watching in the world?
Oh, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. Let's look, number one, at the action of the world central banks, something I address all the time. They are trying to print their way out of this problem, and all they're doing is making this monumentally worse. They've distorted everything from equity markets to currency markets to bond markets. Everything is suffering at this point. And I always tell people, if you really want to see what's happening, you got to focus not on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, not on the S&P 500, but on the bond market. The bond market is where this whole thing, in my opinion, is going to really unfold. Now, we saw some serious action, and it's not getting the attention it should with regard to bond yields, the 10-year specifically, which is kind of like the benchmark. It's fallen off a cliff. It's literally crashed, and I think people started to panic, and we saw how that affected the market. But at the same time, all of this, in my opinion, is an incredibly coordinated attempt by the Federal Reserve to elicit specific actions in the markets. I do believe they felt the market was getting a little ahead of itself, and I'm referring to the Dow Jones S&P 500 now. So what did they do? They came out, they spooked the market, we pulled back, we saw bond yields rise. They want this to a certain degree. They understand, and there's no way they can understand this, that this issue that they've created regarding debt, regarding market distortions, it can only end one way, and that is very, very badly for most people. Again, all this boils down to is they're trying to print their way out of a debt problem. They're adding debt and compounding that problem, and by doing so, have created very dangerous distortions, as plain as I can say it, in the market. And at one point, all of this is going to correct to fair market value. That's a fact. And when that happens, I think many people are going to be caught off guard, especially the unsophisticated person, and they're going to lose it all, everything. They're going to be left desperate and destitute. And some people on the other side of that trade are going to make out like bandits.
Let me ask you this. Do you see a Treasury bond sell-off right now? Are you seeing, like, major investors or anyone selling off bonds at this time?
Absolutely. Look at what's going on here. We have estimates upward of just over the past few weeks. Although I think they're saying 125, 150 billion has fled the bond markets over the past few weeks, just because of these issues with the Federal Reserve talking about tapering, which can never happen. It can never happen. I want people to understand that, and that's why the market rallied the other day. It wasn't because of a good jobs report. It was because of a bad jobs report. We understand that we're bleeding manufacturing jobs. So yes, money is leaving the bond market now, and you keep hearing about this great rotation. I hate when I hear that, because I don't think these people on TV even understand what they're talking about. But they're trying to convince people, oh, money is leaving the bond market, is entering equities, because equities is the place to be. Well, in many ways, the Fed is forcing people into equities, and that's what scares me the most, because the average guy, the average girl is going to get on the bandwagon here and start buying these things, and that's all well and good. They might make money as the market rises, because it will, at least here in the short run, because the Fed is going to backstop it, but they're not going to know when to sell. And that's what happens at the top of every single bubble. And the unsophisticated investor is going to lose it all. And I think that's why it's important for people to educate themselves regarding what's going on, to have an understanding of where this is going on, because in the end, what this all comes down to, and I outline this at length in my book, The Politics of Money, is the availability of resources for people. They are at one point going to become scarce. People are going to scramble for them. We're going to see, well, we're already seeing it on a global scale, social unrest like we've never seen. But we're going to have that here in the United States too. Again, why? Because resources are going to become scarce as the dollar dies. The dollar, in my opinion, is in a terminal phase. It's been in a terminal phase for a very, very long time. Despite the fact that we've seen some strength in the dollar lately, let's just go back 10 years and look how strong the dollar was then compared to now. This is just a bump or a blip, in my opinion, in a mechanism that is, in many ways, is designed to kill the dollar. And we're definitely in a currency war on a global level, and all the central banks are engaged in this. And who's going to suffer? The people.
Now, let me ask you this. Since the people are selling off treasury bonds and they're putting it into the equity market, what do you think is going to happen? That's on the United States side. What do you think is going to happen with Japan with all their money printing?
It's all going to end bad. You can go back through history and just see how all of these types of schemes have ended. Printing money out of thin air and dispersing it just does one thing. It kills the currency. It takes cash away or purchasing power away from the many and gives it to another. It's just a way of redistributing wealth. And that's really what this is all coming down to as well. On a global scale, we're seeing things that we've never seen before. It all goes back to when we started hearing about the European debt crisis. And I think that's when people started to become aware of it. And how are they trying to solve it? They're trying to solve a debt problem by adding more debt. It won't work. It's like taking a drowning man and throwing water on him to try to save him. It can't happen. The system is malignant and it's terminal at this point. And again, in my opinion, and we're just watching what I've called the side effect unfold. I sincerely believe that the crash of 2007, 2008 was the party over moment. What we're in now is just a side effect, and this side effect is terminal. It cannot end well. Let me rephrase that. It's going to end very well for some people, and by and large, most people are going to get everything they have, everything they've worked for, taken away and again redistributed to other people who are on the other side of that trade. It's always the same story. And that's really what I'm trying to do with my blog and my book, is trying to, put a perspective on this that maybe people don't have.
Do you think Japan is going to fall before the collapse here in America?
I think that all of the situation, all the central banks have created bubbles, all right, and debt bubbles. And once one starts to crack, and they're scrambling here to keep the debt problem over here in Europe going, they're all going to pop around the same time. I don't think it's going to go here, and then people are going to even have a chance to look at their investments or whatever they're doing, or even from a survivalist standpoint, and say, okay, I better take action now, because when one of these things burst, it's hard to say where is it really going to start. It's already started, in my opinion, and we're just seeing this kind of slow roll right now, and that's where I really want people to focus here on the bond market in the United States, especially because we're the biggest economy, and when we're starting to see more action like we're seeing now, it's going to at one point, and again, this is in my opinion, snowball out of control, and then we're going to see bond yields rise at an uncontrollable rate. And what is the Fed going to do? The Fed is going to try to step in there and buy all the bonds to suppress those rates, but it's not going to work. They're going to have to print that cash out of thin air to buy these bonds, and what's that going to do? It's going to start a vicious cycle. So as that unfolds, that is going to put enormous pressure on equities, and that's going to wipe out the stock market. Banks are going to close. There's going to be bank runs, and whatever cash people think they have in those banks will be gone. And besides that, it'll be worthless at that point. So I think it's all of this is going to come down at around the same time period, and it's not going to be slow. Right now, we're seeing, I guess you would say, a slow roll into this. But once we hit that moment where there's fear and panic, well, that's it. There's going to be no way to at that moment step up and say, okay, I better do something now. So that's why people need to understand the mechanism behind it all, understand where this is going, and how they can maybe protect themselves, again, as we move forward.
Let me just change gears right now, and let me ask you, the Cyprus bail-in, do you think that is a template for the European and America? Do you think that eventually they will do the bail-ins and freeze accounts and take people's money? Because right now in Cyprus, I mean, they told us 2 weeks for capital controls. It's been over 100 days. Do you think we're going to see this in Europe and in America?
I really do believe that. I think Cyprus was a test bed, and they want to see how people are going to react to that. And again, most people don't even realize what you just said, and they feel completely disconnected from it. Oh, it doesn't affect me. It's not bothering me, really. Well, it will, in my opinion, because these bailouts aren't working. So there will be bail-ins at one point. And how they're going to structure it, they're probably going to say, okay, we're going to use your money to to do this, to take this action, to save this institution. But in return, we're going to, give you these bonds or whatever. So something is going to come out of it. Again, it just all plays into everything that, people like you, people like me are talking about is getting people to understand that the system cannot stand. And without these bail-ins or bailouts or whatever the heck they're going to throw at us next, it's a terminal system. We've reached the point where the acquisition of debt has become poisonous, and that is going to collapse the entire system globally.
And okay, I mean, we all understand that the collapse is coming, and I mean, a lot of people, and wherever you look, you actually see things happening and people talking about that something is not right. But a lot of times people don't know what to do with their money. So let's say people have money in the bank and they're afraid of bail-ins. People have money in the stock market or the treasury market, and they don't want to keep all of their money there at this point. Or they have retirement, and they want to move their retirement money out of the retirement because they're afraid that, that might be taken from them. In your opinion, what should people do with their livelihood, with all their money, depending on which market they have it in? I mean, is there any safe place?
Yeah, there is one safe place, in my opinion, and I've been doing this for years. I've been acquiring hard assets. Look, I don't own a gold mine or a silver mine. I have no interest in any particular company, but I know this: gold and silver are real money. And despite what Ben Bernanke wants to say about it, they hold this for tradition. These central banks are well aware that these are finite assets, and they are indeed real money. Without even the slightest doubt, can tell people that they need to be in that. They need to be in hard assets. They need to get out of the fiat currency game that has been forced upon them by these institutions, and start realizing that the system is rigged against them, period. And the way to get out of it, again, is to hold gold and to hold silver. And, these prices that we've seen, I've been dollar cost averaging into these metals for years. I will continue to do that. I can only pray that they go lower because I will just keep buying more because I understand in the long run, these have nowhere to go but up. But if people just were to look at history, look at every single time, bar none, that we've seen a correction like this with regard to gold, they've rebounded hundreds of percent. So that should tell people something. People should be grabbing this stuff at every chance they get, every spare fiat that they have laying around. They should be investing in gold, physical silver. Forget the paper markets. The paper markets are nonsense. They're manipulated. They're not real. There's no price discovery. And that, in my opinion, is the ultimate safe haven in this environment.
With that in mind, I mean, how high do you think gold and silver and platinum and right now gold, has been smacked down, silver has been smacked down, and do you think we've hit bottom now? Do you think that we still have further to go down in the metals, or do you think metals will start rising?
Well, with all the manipulation that goes on here in the paper markets, and let me just establish this. There are a lot of people who gawk at that. They do not believe the paper markets are manipulated, but they're willing to concede that the Federal Reserve is in fact manipulating the bond market by buying bonds and currency markets by printing currency, but they won't believe that the metals markets are manipulated. It's beyond me. Okay, there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind that they are manipulated. They've been manipulated, and it's done with purpose to affect perception. So, are they at a bottom? I would like to believe they are very, very close. Why? Well, because we understand that there is a cost of production regarding these metals, and we are at that or even below by certain estimates right now. But because of the momentum behind it and because of the game that they play, it may fall somewhat further, although I can't imagine much. But again, in my opinion, I hope it does. I will buy more because I understand that the long-term prospects are going to be multiple 100% higher than they are now. And there are many, many ways to gauge this. You can look at the gold to Dow ratio over time. I believe that due to the Federal Reserve's action in hyperinflating the stock market, a major crash or correction is coming. We are probably going to see a Dow to gold ratio at least 1-to-1, more to 2-to-1 favoring gold. In my book, The Politics of Money, I outline a scenario where the Dow can go to 4,000 and gold will go to 8,000. So we'll have a 2-to-1 favoring gold, even at a 1-to-1, which you're looking at $4,000 gold. And silver 150 to 500, depending on how extreme this goes. But there are a lot of people out there, smart people who are coming up with very similar numbers. So, I can't believe that we're all that far off. What people need to realize is they need to act on it now while these prices are suppressed, because at one time, again, this goes back to my theory that this isn't going to be a slow burn. When fear grips the markets, it's going to be rapid. So you may end up seeing moves in gold, multiple hundreds of dollars in a day at one point. And I really think people need to understand the mechanism behind it all, and that the world central banks, no matter how much they try, they're really not on the side of the people. How much they try to make people believe, they're not on our side. These are private cartels run by the big banks, and their bottom line is not the welfare of the people. It's for themselves, their families, and their friends, period. With that in mind, you can understand where this is all going. This is a setup, in my opinion. The Federal Reserve is a serial bubble blower. They create boom and bust cycles over and over again, and on both sides of those bubbles, on the long and the short end, these institutions are reaping massive profits.
Do you think the government knows that the collapse is coming, and do you think they are preparing for some type of collapse? Because in your latest videos, you seem to lead into that something and the government is preparing for something. So do you think they are?
100% they are. They're not stupid. They completely understand where this is going. They've already said they're setting up the police state here. We have militarized police in every state in the union using military tactics and military weapons. They're setting up the surveillance. We're being surveilled. It's no secret. It's everywhere. We're now seeing the curtailing of information. The next step is going to be cutting off communication or some other thing. But this is clearly being set up exactly like a military campaign. They understand that as the system collapses and continues to collapse, and we saw this in the most recent jobs report, our economy is not going anywhere but down the toilet. People are going to be looking for work, getting paid less money, not being able to make ends meet because of the inflation. They tell us that is not here. We all understand that it's not true. Obviously, there is inflation. We all shop. We all put gasoline in our cars. We buy energy. So they understand as this accelerates, people are going to become more and more unhappy. And I'll tell you where that's going to start, in my opinion, is going to be the youth. The youth unemployment is staggering, even here in the United States. And these young people are going to realize that, hey, you know what? The American dream is not real. I cannot achieve this under this oppressive environment and government and what they're trying to do to us. So they're going to rebel. And I think that's where the movement in our country is going to start, with those young people who are forced to maybe live with their parents or work at mundane jobs earning minimum wage or whatever they have to do. But there's no doubt in my mind that the social unrest that we're seeing all over the world is going to happen here as well. The United States is not immune to this, despite the fact that the politicians and all of them, they want you to believe the U.S. is immune to all these problems, which is completely ridiculous.
Let me ask you, I'm going to go back now to videos, I don't know, it's probably maybe a year ago, and you used to talk about the collapse is going to be like a nuclear explosion or something in that realm.
No.
When you said that, what exactly do you mean that the collapse will be like a nuclear attack on the U.S.?
Well, what I really was trying to convey is the damage or the loss of life that will be inflicted on a global scale because of this collapse will be on par with a nuclear exchange. It's very simple to understand why. Again, this whole thing, as we move forward deeper into this collapse here, is going to be the availability of resources for people, how they can feed themselves or support themselves or have shelter. As this system continues to deteriorate, these resources will become scarce. People will not be able to acquire basic things to live. And this is what people are going to riot in the streets and unfortunately probably resort to violence against each other. And that's why, again, the police state is being set up here in the United States. They understand where this is going. I think we are staring into the abyss, my friend, and there's no way out of it. The reset button is going to be one that will be talked about for thousands of years. And the sad part to this whole thing is it never had to happen. It never had to happen. If they simply would have allowed the market to do its job, and that was the crash of 2007, 2008 was just a free market trying to establish fair market value across the board. It wasn't allowed to do that. The Fed has reinflated that equity bubble. They're trying to reinflate a housing bubble, and they're doing that at the expense of the dollar. They're killing the dollar. You can't be in cash, because if you're in cash, you're being paid interest less than the rate of inflation. If it's in the bank, you can't be in bonds right now. You see what's going on. So they're forcing people into equities, and that tells me something. If they're forcing people into equities, why do they want you there? They want people in equities. They want to force the stock market higher, because the higher they can inflate that bubble, and I think we're getting toppy now, the greater the correction is going to be and the transfer of wealth is going to be. That's really what this whole thing comes down to. Resources, a transfer of wealth, Personally, I think we're going back to a feudal system. I've been talking about this for a very long time. The haves and have-nots, the middle class will not exist in several years.
For the final question, let me ask you, do you think the U.S. will be the reserve currency going forward, or do you think the U.S. dollar will be dropped and another currency will be put in its place?
I think that China wants the world's reserve currency. They want it for a very long time. They've been trying to position themselves that way. That's why they're acquiring all this gold. The U.S. dollar is, right now, as we know, losing its reserve status around the world. I do not believe the U.S. will always be the world reserve. It hasn't always been the world reserve. We've had several world reserve currencies. The dollar will maybe play some role in it unless it's replaced by a completely new system, which really isn't out of the realm of reality at all. There may be a basket of currencies they're going to put together as a reserve, or it may turn out to be, in my opinion, we're going back to a currency which is either backed or partially backed by a hard asset, and that asset will be gold. Why gold? Because gold is the most stable asset the world has ever seen. Despite the swings that we've seen, if you look over time, you will see that plays out to be the truth. But the U.S. dollar is being systematically destroyed by the Federal Reserve, by our policymakers. They understand where this is going, and believe me, they are well aware of this and are putting themselves in the right spots as we move forward, getting away from fiat currency.
And how can people find you or get in touch with you? Do you have a website that people can get to?
Sure. There's always my YouTube blog. You can just go to GregoryMannarino.com. It'll take you right to my Business Day blog. I also do have a website. It's called TradersChoice.net, where I offer free stock picks. No sign-ups, no passwords, no anything. You just go right to the site and you can just use it. And probably the easiest way would be just to, follow me on YouTube. I encourage people to do that. Also friend me on Facebook. I would never turn down a friend request.
Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate you coming on here and talking with me.
It's great to be here. Let's do this again.
All right, thanks.